Hello, Craig from fixitfallows here again, and once again in the garage and back with the Carrera Kraken, my wife's bike that she rides. The front forks on this are a SR Suntour XCR. They're not an air fork, they are a coil sprung fork. They do have lockout kind of thing, kind of works, it's not the best. Anyway, the forks need a bit of a service, so I'm going to show you how to strip them down, how to give them a clean. Let's get into it. Okay, so Carrera Kraken came with SR Suntour XCR front forks. These aren't air, these are coil sprung, and they needed a little bit of service. They have a lockout under there. So in this leg stanchion here, there is an air canister for the lockout. In this side, it is purely sprung. What I'm going to do is I am going to undo these nuts here and here and pull off these stanchions. That'll allow me to get to the rubber seals and guides in there, and I'll be able to clean out all the old residual grease and muck and grit and horrible stuff. Once I've taken these bolts off here, as I say, these stanchions will lift off, but because I don't want to disturb the brake caliper here, which is all set up nicely for the front disc, I don't really want to muck around with that too much. What I've done, the easier option is the Clark skeletal brakes. Can detach from the handlebars nice and easy because they have a split clamp like so. So I have detached the brake lever. So now all I need to do is undo those two bolts and we can lift that off. So I'll just set the camera down somewhere where you can observe that. Okay, so you need a 5mm hex Allen key, and we just put that in there like so, and undo, and on that side, and undo. And these bolts pass through into rods that are connected to the uppermost part of the fork, and that's what holds it all together. So out comes one. And out comes the other, and it should be a case of just pulling this whole section off. Now I'm placing one foot on the handlebar to keep it down, and it's just a case of pulling. There was a bit of a pop there as the air released, and there you go. You have to give it a bit of a tug, it was stuck on, and off it comes. There you are, there are the stanchions. Down inside there is the seals and stuff. They need a bit of a clean. They can be replaced, but to be honest, it's not really worth it on these. In time, I'm going to be putting some air forks on this. So what have we got left behind on the bike? What we've got is the upper half of the forks. On these cheaper SR Suntours, it's just a chromium plated bit of steel by the looks of it, and that does wear, get a little bit pitted. Let's have a look. So yes, this side on the left is the actual sort of spring mechanism down in there, and this side here is the lockout. Now the rest of this can be accessed from the top of the fork. Okay, so on the spring side of the fork, you've got an adjustable knob here to adjust the tension on the springs, and you need a special tool, which is this one. SR Suntour sells this little spanner. You see it's got like serrations or castellations in it that correspond to the top of there, and you place it on like so, and you keep pressing down on it, and you turn like that, and you keep turning, and this cap unscrews. Now this is all plastic, and it's got a plastic thread on it, and that screws down into the metal threading of the fork crown. Now you need to be exceptionally careful when you put this back in that you do not cross thread it, because the metal threads in the crown will chew the plastic threads on this cap, and you will have to replace it. So you see this thing here, when you turn the knob here, it makes this sort of protrusion rod extend down, and it puts pressure, like preload I think they call it, on the spring. So we'll put that to one side. If we push up from the very bottom, out comes the spring unit. There we go, it is literally a spring. Okay, there's no real adjustment you can do to these. It's quite a weighty unit, but that is what deals with the compression, etc., on these cheaper non-air cylinder forks. So there you are. Give that a clean up and a nice light re-grease. Okay, so the spring has been removed from inside the top half of the fork. We're now left with this kind of rubberized nylon rod. This is the bit that screws down or is bolted through from the bottom stanchion. Now all you need to do is grab this rod like this and take the white nylon bung at the end and pull, and it pops off. But as I've got the bike sort of set up still, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long screwdriver, push that up into the tube like so, and then you can see the top end emerges, and there's still a secondary spring there. So now I can pull that up and out. Let me just place the camera somewhere where it will stay. So the camera's in a position where it'll stay, so I just push the screwdriver up, and up comes that spring and the rod, like so. There we have that rod, and that also has a second spring on it, so you get different rates of damping. You've got the small spring and the larger spring. So we'll just clean that up. Okay, so that's all the springs out, and the sort of nylon rod bit, that's out. But also in there is like a white nylon cup. And to get that out, I'm just going to take this long rod, place it at the bottom of the fork there, and just gently working it around, just easing this cap out. And it's quite tight at the top, so just gently working it around. You can see it emerging out there. There it comes. A few more taps and it'll be out. There it is. So this cap here sits at the very bottom of the upper part of the fork, and that is there to house the nylon rod and the bottom spring. So that sits in there like that and forms a seal at the end of the bottom half of the fork, and then the main fork section sits on top of there, and between the little spring and the big spring you get a bit of rebound control and overall damping. I mean, it's a bit rudimentary, but then this is a entry-level fork. So there you go. What we're going to do is going to clean off all the old grease off of those, give the inside of the tube a clean out, put some new grease on, maybe not so much this time, put that side of the fork back together, and then have a look at the lockout side. Okay, so using that long drill bit I had again, I've just wrapped some tissue around it, and I'm just going to slide up and down inside the fork like this, just to get the worst of the grease out. Okay, do that a few times with different bits of tissue. at the top. We'll wipe around at the bottom. There we go, that's now good for the clean springs and shafts to be put back in. Here we are with the springs. I'm just going to use some old white spirit that I've used for cleaning drivetrains in the past. Now it might be murky, but it's still perfectly usable to clean parts like this. You wouldn't want to clean your paintbrushes with it anymore because it would contaminate them, but for these parts it's more than serviceable still. So we'll pour that in there. Take some old toothbrushes and just give that a general bit of cleaning. Let it soak, let it do its stuff, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Okay, so having poured away that old white spirit, you can see the amount of grit and muck that's left behind in the bottom of that cleaning tub. So that was all inside the fork, making it all gritty and horrible. So the newly cleaned springs are back in that cleaning tub. I'm just going to give it a second little soak in now that they're a bit cleaner, just to wash off anything that's remaining. There we go. And I just got to dry them off and they're good to go back in. Okay, so that's the spring side of the fork all done and cleaned. Now we just need to take out the lockout cartridge from the left hand side and give that a clean up in there. So first things first, we've got to take off the control knob, and that's just a simple case of prising it off with a screwdriver. So put it underneath there, pop it off. It's just a pressure fit, you see, like there. You know, so there's some splines in there that push down on top. And just like on the spring side of things, there's this like castellated nut here that you've got to use the special little spanner on. So once again, push it down firmly and give it a turn. Like the other side, it is a plastic nut, so when putting it back together you do need to be careful of those threads, the plastic threads going into the threaded crown of the fork. So yeah, we just undo this and then the whole thing should pop out. As you can see, I'm utilising my workbench here to hold the bike in place. You could obviously do this in your work stand, but I'm doing it this way today. So we undo that and lift out. Okay, so yeah, once again, here is the air canister. At the top end, that's the end that's exposed out of the crown. This knob here turns. That's what decides whether this piston can retract or not. And it's a bit like the canister you get on an office chair. Same sort of principle. You get the same sort of thing inside your dropper post. This is just on a larger scale. Now this is SR Suntour, and somewhere on the side of the canister you will find a code, and on this one it's here, if you can pick that up on the camera. So we've got a manufacture date, which is 11th of June 2012, followed by the code for this product, which is FUN 006 and then dash 26. So because this is a 26-inch bike, 26-inch fork, therefore this is suitable for a 26-inch fork. As I say, you can get replacements of these, and that's the code you need to look up to buy one. This at the bottom is just like an extension of the threaded element that can be taken off, but for this designer fork that is required to stay on there. And you'll notice that I can currently compress it because I have got the knob turned to allow so, but if I turn the knob around a bit, I could just do with the control knob to allow me to do it. I think if I turn it, let's find the point at which it, there you go, I can't compress that anymore, there's a lot of resistance. It does feel a little bit notchy. I think this is probably starting to go, but for the time being I'm just going to clean it back up and put it back in the bike, because at some point I'm going to replace these forks with some air forks. But yeah, this thing is not serviceable at all. As much as I like taking things apart, I'm not taking this apart because it does contain some high pressure gases, as it warning there on the side says, and I think I'll leave that alone. But for now, that's all that's left to do is clean down inside there a bit. Already done that one, and then put the whole lot back together. Okay, so putting it back together, I shall take the lockout canister, drop it back down into the fork, and be very careful with getting that thread bit back. Now what I like to do with threads like this is turn it the wrong way, and that kind of seats it, and then slowly do it back the other way. There we go, that seems to be okay. Yep. And now we need the tool once more, which I placed somewhere where I knew I'd find it. Not. And then okay, I won't put the cap back on because I can't recall whether it was locked or not locked, and we won't know that until we put the wheel back on. Also, if you find this lockout isn't working for you, bear in mind that the control knob in there can be turned multiple times, but there's a point in between the fully turned clockwise and fully turned anti-clockwise is the point at which it switches from being open or closed, and it's just a question of finding that point and then putting your control lever back on at that point, so that, you know, like a just shy of a 180-degree turn will turn it from on or off. So there's no specific position it needs to be in, it's just a case of trial and error until you find that point. But that's back on. Okay, now it's just a case of rebuilding the shock absorber side. Okay, so I'm just going to use some lithium grease, and I'm just going to lightly grease around the springs, give them some protection from moisture, and just give it some lubricant, and then put it back in. Okay, that should be plenty on that spring. Get a bit more, put it around the base there, so when it seats into this nylon cap like that. Okay, now I'm going to drop this unit down inside the fork. Okay, just taking a mallet, you can just tap it in there. Right, now we can just drop that back in, and then using something long, push the whole unit back down into its seated position, like that. Okay, now we take the main spring too. Now what you want to try and do is position this plastic sort of heat shrink bit in the middle of the spring, because the top and the bottom of the spring are held in place, and under compression that spring will try to bend, and this bit of plastic will stop the worst of the friction when the spring bends and touches the inside of the fork tube. So let's apply some grease to that. I mean, the grease really is moisture protection more than anything else. These things are not waterproof, so let's get some grease on a tissue and just rub it around like so. I mean, I guess you could use any other form of spray on. If you got If you've got access to some spray on Teflon stuff or whatever, that will do just as good a job. So that's that, and then we just drop that down inside the tube like so. That's seated in there, and then the next thing to go back in is the screw-in cap at the top there. There's the cap. It's always best to have it set at its most the least amount of preload, because you don't want this bit protruding out any further than it has to. The reason being is that the top of the spring is sitting just there, and you have got to compress that spring. You've got to push down and engage those threads at the same time, so whilst trying not to cross thread it. So we'll push down and then just gently start turning until, yeah, that's bitten, that's nice. So we'll keep turning that, and now we use the little plastic spanner. Turning that, hoping, really have to be careful not to cross thread that. There we go, so that's going in. If you do cross thread it, you'll know straight away when you have. Take it out and then using a Stanley knife blade, try and clean the plastic thread as much as possible, getting all the swarf and that out from the damaged bit of the thread, and then put it back in. And you'll notice if it's cross threaded, this plug starts to go in at an angle. So whatever angle it's going in at, you need to apply more pressure when you then put it back in to try and keep the threads true and the plug going in perpendicular to the fork. There we go, so that's back in there. Now it's a case of putting a nylon plug back on the base of here. Now that is just a simple push fit affair. So we'll push that on like that. Just wipe off any excess grease from there. Okay, so now the upper part of the forks have been completely serviced. Now it's a case of just taking the lower stanchion and using a long rod, cleaning down inside here as best as possible, and then reapplying some grease on the top bushings part. Okay, so taking the lower stanchion and a cloth or a rag, and I want to get in there and wipe the worst of the grease and grime away from inside there. These are like the dust seals, so any grit and grime and dirt that's in there will obviously wear the other part of your fork and makes horrible rubbing, grinding noises, so we need to clean all that out as best as possible. You can take off the little springs here and take off these rubbers, and as I said earlier, you can buy replacements should you wish to, but I'm just giving these just a general clean for today. So clean out in there, get another bit of tissue, put it on the end of a long stick and work it in. Now bearing in mind, try not to get your tissue stuck down in the fork. Now surprisingly on these forks, these lower stanchions are actually made of magnesium, so they're surprisingly light. Just a shame the rest of the fork isn't so light. Okay, if you want, you can take some cleaner, give them a spray, give them a bit of a spray on the inside. Taking some more grease, you just put it on your finger like so, and you just need to reach down inside there and apply it to like the nylon bushings and around the top of the rubbers. You don't need to go mad, just a little bit. that. That should do. Wipe off any excess from the outside. And now they're good to go back on the bike. Okay, so we've got the bike back on the saddle on the handlebars, and we can take the stanchions and slide them back on, like so. Sliding them down. And let's take one of those bolts. Put that in like so. Take the other one. Put that in, and we just take the 5mm Allen key again. Do that up. And for that side. Like so, and then we can drop the wheel back in. And then we flip the bike back over. Like that. Obviously the brake lever's got to go back on, which I shall just quickly do. Okay, so taking the blue control lever, place it on top and turn this control knob to its full clockwise position, and then that will be in its locked out position. So if we place the cap down in the locked position like so, and then we can turn the control knob around to the open position, and then the suspension is allowed to work. So there you are, guys. That's how you strip down an SR Suntour XCR fork. Pretty basic stuff, really. It is a basic fork. There's some big old springs inside there. They just need cleaning out, all the grit taken out, and the guides and the rubber seals sort of greased up a little bit. Well, what can I say? It's a basic entry-level fork. Don't expect miracles when you service yours. They're not going to turn into silky smooth Fox forks, but they will feel a bit better. So thanks for watching. Check out some of my other videos. Please subscribe and please hit the notification bell so you are advised and notified of my latest videos. And once again, thank you very much for watching. See you soon. Bye.